Some men break loud. They punch walls. They throw things across the room until the noise drowns out whatever's eating them alive. I have never been that kind of man. I break quiet. And a quiet man breaking is a thing most people never see coming, because he doesn't look broken. He looks calm. He looks like he's got it handled. Right now, I am standing outside a courthouse in Tulsa, watching two uniformed officers walk my son through a set of glass doors in handcuffs, his college roommate standing off to the side filming the whole thing on his phone like it's content for later. I want you to understand something before I tell you how we got here. I didn't do this to him. He did this to himself. All I did was stop standing in front of the truck. 4 years, Cole. 4 years I stood in front of that truck for you. And somewhere in there, you decided I always would. The courthouse doors swing shut behind the officers with a heavy metal sound, the kind that echoes a little longer than you'd expect. My son turns his head, finds me in the small crowd of onlookers, and I watch his face do three things in about 2 seconds. Confusion, then disbelief, then something that might be the first real fear I've seen on him since he was 8 years old and thought he'd lost his dog. His roommate, a kid named Deacon, who's had a mouth on him since the day I met him, lowers his phone just long enough to shout across the plaza, "You did this? You called them on your own son?" I didn't answer him. I watched the doors close, and I kept my hands in my coat pockets, because if I took them out, they might have been shaking, and I wasn't going to give anybody the satisfaction of seeing that. Welcome to whatever this is going to become for you and me, son. You had every chance in the world to make a different choice. You just kept choosing wrong, and I kept letting you. Let me back this up, because none of this makes sense without the part that came before it, and trust me, it isn't the part you'd expect. 4 days before I stood outside that courthouse, I finished my shift at the plant a little after 5. I've spent 31 years running a machine shop floor in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. The kind of work that leaves metal shavings in the cuffs of your jeans, no matter how many times you wash them. The kind of work where your hands ache by Thursday and you're grateful anyway, because it's steady and it's honest, and it fed a family for 3 decades. I've driven the same Ford F-250 since 2011, 260,000 miles on it. I pulled into the driveway of the house on Larchmont Drive, the same house I bought when I was 28, and Diane and I thought we'd fill every bedroom in it. We filled 2 of them. Then cancer took Diane 11 years ago, and one of those bedrooms has been closed up ever since, and the house has been quieter than any house has a right to be. Cole's been away at the University of Tulsa on what he calls a leave of absence, which is a nicer way of saying he stopped going to most of his classes somewhere around February, and I'm still covering the lease on an apartment he barely sleeps in, because every time I bring it up, he tells me I don't understand what it's like to be his age right now, and I let it go, the way I let everything go. I went upstairs that Thursday. I have a habit I've never told anybody about, not even my sister after a long shift. I go into what used to be Diane's sewing room, and I open the bottom drawer of her old cedar chest, and I take out the small wooden box that holds my father's Purple Heart and dog tags from Korea, and Diane's wedding ring, which I never could bring myself to do anything with after she passed, except keep it close. I sit on the edge of the daybed she used to work at, and I open that box, and for about a minute, both of them are alive again in my chest at the same time, my father and my wife, 2 people I loved and buried decades apart, sitting together in a box that fits in my 2 hands. That Thursday, I opened the drawer, and the box was there, sitting exactly where it always sits. But something about it looked wrong before I even touched it. You know that feeling? When your body understands something is off a full second before your mind catches up to why? I picked it up. It was too light. I opened the lid, and the ring was gone. Diane's wedding ring, the one with the small Marquise diamond I'd saved 8 months to afford back in 1987. The one she wore every single day for 26 years, until the chemo made her fingers too swollen to keep it on. And even then, she kept it on a chain around her neck, so it never once left her body until the day I buried her with it. Except I didn't bury her with it. I couldn't. I kept it. It was the last thing that was still hers. I checked the rest of the chest. I checked her old jewelry box on the dresser, even though I already knew that ring didn't belong anywhere but that drawer. I checked my gun safe downstairs, where I keep the important papers, just in case somehow it had ended up there and I'd forgotten. There's exactly one other person with a key to this house. I called him. It rang 3 times before he picked up, and I could hear noise in the background. Music, voices, somebody laughing too loud. Hey, Dad. Kinda busy right now. Cole, where's your mother's ring? Silence for a beat. Then, too fast, too smooth. What ring? You know exactly what ring. It's gone from the sewing room. I heard him cover the phone. Heard him say something to somebody. Heard that same somebody laugh again like none of this was happening in real time, to a real person. Then he came back, and his voice had changed into that flat, put-upon register he uses when he thinks I'm the unreasonable one. Okay, look, it's just a ring, Dad. Mom's been gone a long time. She doesn't need it. I do. Your mother's wedding ring is not a thing you needed, Cole. I needed the money. You wouldn't give it to me, so I found another way. Why does everybody always have to make everything so dramatic? Cole, did you sell it? I've got to go, Dad. We'll talk when I'm back. The line went dead in my hand, and I stood there in my kitchen holding a phone that had gone completely silent. And I want you to understand, in 62 years on this earth, I don't think I have ever heard a silence that loud. He didn't hesitate. He didn't even pretend to feel bad. This is a boy who cried for 2 days straight at 9 years old because he lost the friendship bracelet his mother made him at a Cub Scout campout. And at 23, he pawned his dead mother's wedding ring and talked about it like he'd sold a used bike on Marketplace. I want to tell you this came out of nowhere, that my son snapped one day and did something out of character. That is not what happened. Nothing like this happens out of nowhere. It happens slow, one excuse at a time, one he's just struggling at a time, until 4 years go by and you wake up a stranger in your own house, funding a life you're not even allowed to be part of. Let me take you back to where it actually started. Diane passed when Cole was 19, in his sophomore year. Ovarian cancer. Stage 4 by the time they found it. 9 months, from diagnosis to the funeral. I won't dwell on those 9 months. Some of you listening already know exactly what that looks like, and you don't need me to walk you through it. Some of you don't, and I hope you never do. What I'll tell you instead is what it did to my son, and what it did to me, because those two things ended up on a collision course, and it took me 4 years to see it coming. Cole turned his grief outward. Everything became a fight. Everything was somehow my fault. Even the things I had no power over, the diagnosis, the treatments that didn't take, the fact that his mother wasn't there to help him move into his dorm the way we'd planned. I turned my grief inward and swallowed every bit of it because I was terrified. Terrified that if I pushed back on him even once, if I made him sit in a single consequence, I would lose the only family I had left in this world. So I didn't push back. Not once, in 4 years. When he was 20, he took my truck to a party 2 towns over that he wasn't supposed to be at, and he clipped a guardrail on the way home and tore the whole front quarter panel off. Nobody hurt, thank God for that, he said. A deer ran out in front of him. There was no deer. I paid the $1,100 deductible myself and never asked him for a nickel of it. I told myself he was just young. When he started at Tulsa, he called me from his dorm room, crying, saying the whole place felt wrong, that he needed a fresh start somewhere else, that staying there was going to break him. I'd already put almost $18,000 toward that first year, plus a deposit on an off-campus apartment he ended up barely living in. I swallowed it. I told myself he was still grieving. He never once called me on my birthday, not one time in 4 years. I always called him on his. I sent money whenever he asked, 100 here, 200 there, for gas, for groceries, for books, and I never once asked where it actually went. I told myself he was just busy, just young, just figuring it out. I'd cook dinner most nights, nothing fancy, whatever I could put together after 10 hours on the shop floor, and on the nights he'd actually come by, he'd sit across the table from me, scrolling his phone through the whole meal. I'd ask about his day. One-word answers. I'd tell him I loved him before he left. Yeah, you too, he'd say, already halfway out the door. And I told myself, at least he's still here. At least I haven't lost him too. Here's what I understand now, sitting here telling you this, that I didn't understand then. I thought I was being patient. I thought I was being the bigger man, the father who wouldn't abandon his son the way life had already taken his mother from him. But I wasn't being patient. I was being a doormat, and he knew it. He knew I would never say no. He knew I would never make him sit still inside a consequence. So somewhere along the way, without either of us really noticing the exact moment it happened, I stopped being his father in his eyes. I became a source of money, a safety net he never had to say thank you for. Not a man who had lost just as much as he had. The first time I ever actually told him no, the real first time, 4 years in, was 9 days before the ring went missing. He'd called asking for $3,000. A friend of his named Deacon was starting some kind of online business, reselling sneakers, and Cole wanted in as a co-investor. Said it was a sure thing, said everybody was doing it, said if I really believed in him, I'd help him get this off the ground. I did the math in my head while he talked. $3,000. My mortgage that month was $1,400. My retirement account had taken a hit the year before that I still hadn't recovered from. I can't do it this time, Cole, I told him. I wish I could, son, but I just can't swing it right now. The reaction was instant. Are you serious right now? You always find money for the important stuff, but the one time I need it. I'm serious. I'm sorry. You know what? You're just like everybody else. You don't actually believe in me. You never have. He hung up before I could finish my sentence. He didn't call back that night, and he didn't call the next day either. I figured he'd cool off the way he always did, that in a week he'd act like the whole conversation never happened. Same as always. I had no idea he was already sitting in his apartment with his mother's wedding ring in his hand, looking up the nearest pawn shop on his phone. I had no idea that in less than 72 hours, I would be standing in a run-down shop off Admiral Place, staring through a scratched glass case at the last physical piece of my wife I had left on this earth. And I had no idea that this time, for the first time in 4 years, I was not going to swallow it. Something in me had gone still, not angry yet. Still, the way water goes, still right before it starts to roll toward a boil. I set my phone down on the kitchen counter and stood in that quiet house for a long time. Then I grabbed my keys. I didn't turn the radio on. 14 miles from Larchmont Drive to that stretch of Admiral Place where every third storefront is either a payday loan office or a pawn shop, and I drove every one of those miles in dead silence. Nothing but the rattle of the old F-250's engine and my own heartbeat sitting somewhere up in my ears. You'd think a man driving toward a truth like that would have 100 thoughts running through his head at once. I didn't. My mind had gone somewhere strange and quiet, almost peaceful, the way I imagine the air goes still right before a tornado touches down. I thought about Diane. I thought about the night I proposed to her on the back steps of her parents' place outside Muskogee, my hands shaking so bad I nearly dropped the ring in the grass. I thought about the day the doctor said the word stage 4, and how she squeezed my hand in that cold little office and said, "Well, at least we've still got each other." Like she was the one comforting me, instead of the other way around. I thought about the promise I made her, unspoken, the day we lowered her into the ground, that I'd hold what was left of this family together, that I'd raise our son right, even without her here to help me do it. Some promises you keep by giving everything you've got. Some promises, I was about to learn, you only keep by finally taking something back. The shop was called Route 66, Loan and Jewelry. Bars on the windows, a bell over the door that jingled too cheerful for the place it was attached to. A heavy-set man behind the counter introduced himself as Wade. I walked the length of the display case and stopped. My knees actually went a little weak. There it was, Diane's ring, sitting under a buzzing fluorescent light next to a row of pawned guitars and a stack of gold chains. "Help you find something?" Wade asked. "That ring right there," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "Where'd you get it?" Young fella brought it in a couple days back. Said it was his grandmother's. Gave him $300 for it. $300. A ring that had taken me 8 months of overtime to save up for in 1987, traded away for a fraction of what some sneaker scheme probably needed to get off the ground. "That's my late wife's wedding ring," I said. "My son took it out of my house." Wade's face tightened up right away. He pulled out an intake log and a photocopy of Cole's driver's license, without me having to ask. "Look, man, he had valid ID, Signed a statement saying it was his to sell. I don't want to be the guy holding stolen property. I really don't. But under Oklahoma law, I can't just hand it back over the counter to you either. I've got to call it in, and they're going to need proof of ownership before they can put an official hold on it. I've got the original receipt and the appraisal both, I said. They're in my safe. At home. Bring 'em, Wade said. I'll call the precinct right now. If you'd told me 12 hours earlier that I'd be driving home to grab paperwork so a police detective could put a hold on my dead wife's wedding ring, I'd have told you that you didn't know the first thing about me. I'd have told you I'd never let it get that far, that I'd find some quieter way to handle it, the way I always did. I drove back to that shop 30 minutes later, with the original documents in my hand. The detective who showed up introduced himself as Sergeant Marcus Whitfield. Mid-50s, tired around the eyes, the kind of cop who's heard every version of every broken family story there is, and somehow still manages to sound like he means it when he says he's sorry. He took my statement standing right there at the counter, cross-referenced the ring against my appraisal, and filled out an official evidence hold form. Then he set his pen down, folded his hands on the counter, and here is where it got hard. Here is the part where a total stranger looked me dead in the eye and asked me the question I had been too scared to ask myself for 4 straight years. Mr. Whitaker, I've got to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it before you answer me. This is grand larceny, and it's fraud too, since he used false pretenses on that intake form. The combined value plus his prior record because I ran it, and he's got a possession charge from 2 years back that got expunged when he turned 21. This could push it into felony territory, not a slap on the wrist. Are you certain this is what you want to do? Because once I file this and we put a warrant out, there's no quiet way to pull it back. Whitfield studied my face for a second, then nodded slow, like he'd watched a father make this exact decision maybe half a dozen times in his career, and it had never once gotten easier for him to witness. All right, he said. We'll get the paperwork moving. You said he's out of town right now? Court hearing for a friend of his. Deacon Miller. Some kind of business dispute, small claims. I don't know all of it. Cole's supposed to be there as a witness Monday morning. We'll have somebody there. He looked at me the way you look at a man doing something you're not entirely sure is right. Like I was somehow becoming the villain of my own story. The father who was supposed to shield his son from the world, no matter what that son did to deserve otherwise. But here is what nobody standing in that pawn shop understood. I had been protecting Cole for 4 straight years, and all that protection had built me a son who genuinely believed consequences were something that only ever happened to other people. I didn't want to punish him. I wanted to save him. And I was starting to understand that sometimes the only way left to save somebody is to finally let them fall. Wade held the ring in a small manila envelope while the paperwork finished processing. When Whitfield handed it back to me, I held it a second before slipping it into my jacket pocket, right over my heart, the same pocket I'd carried it in the day I helped carry Diane's casket. I drove home with the windows cracked, that first warm April air finally starting to smell like spring instead of the tail end of winter. Somewhere on the drive, stopped at a red light, I did something I probably shouldn't have. Or maybe some part of me needed to. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. There he was. A courthouse selfie, captioned, "Standing by my boy no matter what. Brotherhood means something." Next photo, 20 minutes newer, him and Deacon and 2 other guys I didn't recognize, grinning outside some barbecue place, a stack of to-go boxes on the hood of somebody's car, while I was driving home with his mother's wedding ring sitting against my chest. My son was posting about loyalty and brotherhood with money he'd gotten from breaking something inside me that was never his to break. And here's the part that scared me a little, if I'm being honest with you. I didn't feel guilty watching it. I didn't feel a shred of doubt creeping in. What I felt was something closer to relief, like I'd been holding a hot coal in my bare hand for 4 years, telling myself the burn wasn't really that bad, and I'd finally just let it drop. I got home a little after 7 that evening. The house was quiet, same as it's been for 11 years now. I went upstairs, opened the bottom drawer, and set the box back exactly where it belonged, the ring inside it. I closed that drawer slow, the way you close a door on a room you don't plan on going back into for a while. Then I went downstairs, made myself a plate, and sat alone at the kitchen table. Monday morning, 4 days from now, he walks into that courthouse, thinking he's got away with it clean. He has no idea what's going to be waiting for him at the door. I picked up my fork. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. For the first time in 4 years, I wasn't the one absorbing the hit. I was the one who had finally decided to stop swallowing it. If any of you have been in a spot like this with your own kids, I'd like to hear about it in the comments, and hit that like button while you're down there, would you? Monday came slow, the kind of slow where every hour drags its feet on purpose just to make you sit in it. Around 9 that morning, Whitfield sent a text. Hearing starts at 10. We'll be positioned outside the courtroom. I didn't go down there to gloat, and I didn't go down there to yell. Some of you might think I should have stayed home and let the police handle it without me watching, but I needed to be there. I needed to stand in that hallway and prove to myself that when he looked for me to step in front of the train one more time, I wasn't going to do it. I stood near the back of the plaza, my shoulder against a concrete pillar, watching the courthouse doors. A little before 10:30, I saw him come out of a side door with Deacon, laughing about something, looking loose and easy, the way he'd looked his whole life whenever he thought the world owed him a soft landing. 2 plainclothes officers stepped away from the pillar across from me. Cole Whitaker? Yeah, that's me. Still smiling. Still not understanding. You're under arrest for grand larceny and fraud. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. The shift on his face happened in less than a second. Confusion, then disbelief, then something close to real fear. Deacon screamed. Somebody's phone came up filming before the cuffs had even clicked shut. And as they turned him around, Deacon spotted me by the pillar and shouted loud enough that half the plaza heard it. You did this? You called them on your own son? Cole found my eyes through the small crowd that had started to gather. Dad! Dad! Tell them this is a mistake. Dad, please. I didn't move. I didn't say a single word. I stood against that pillar with my hands in my coat pockets, and I watched the doors swallow him up. I watched until they closed, all the way. Then I turned around and walked to my truck, and I sat there in the parking lot for a long while, just letting myself feel whatever it was I was feeling. It wasn't joy. I want to be straight with you about that. There wasn't a piece of me that felt good watching my son get walked out in cuffs while some kid recorded it for strangers online. But there was a small, tired, 4 years worn-down piece of me that finally exhaled, like I'd been holding my breath since the morning we buried Diane, and I could let it go at last. He called that night. County lockup, one allowed call. And of course it was to me. I almost let it ring out. I watched the screen light up with his contact photo, a picture from 3 Thanksgivings back, from before all of this, when he still smiled at me like he meant it. I answered on the 4th ring. Dad. His voice cracked already. Dad, oh my God, you have to come down here. They're saying this could be a felony. Tell them you gave me permission to sell it, please. Just tell them that. I can't do that, Cole. A beat of silence, then sharper. What do you mean you can't? I'm your son. You're right, I said. You are my son, and I have failed you. I heard his breath catch, like he thought this was the turn, the part where I always softened, where I always found some way to fix it for him. For 4 years, I said, I let you treat me like a bank account. I let you take from me and never once asked you to give a single thing back. I let you disrespect your mother's memory, and I told myself I was being a good father by staying quiet about it. I wasn't. I was being a coward. I was so scared of losing you that I forgot to actually raise you. Dad, please. You don't understand. If this stays on my record, I lose everything. I'm not bailing you out. My voice didn't shake. I want you to know that. 4 years of swallowing every single thing, and in that one moment, my voice did not shake at all. I'm not hiring you a lawyer. You're going to sit in that cell, and you're going to think about what you did. And when you get out, you're going to face whatever comes next on your own. You're supposed to be my father. You're supposed to protect me. No, Cole. I'm a father who finally loves you enough to let you fail. I hung up. I sat there a long time afterward, staring at the phone in my hand. I thought about Diane, about what she'd say if she could see any of this. I knew she'd be heartbroken. I also knew she'd understand, because she was the one who used to tell me, long before any of this happened, that love without any limits on it isn't love at all. It's just enabling wearing a nicer name. I had let our son grow into someone his own mother wouldn't recognize if she walked through that door tonight. That night, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I slept clean through until morning. The consequences came fast after that, the way they always do once a man finally stops standing in front of them. Cole spent 4 nights in county before a judge set his bail. Bail I didn't post. Deacon's family put it up eventually, some arrangement between their lawyer and his. When he finally walked out, he had a felony charge sitting on his record that wasn't going anywhere. Not with a plea deal, not with time. Word got around Broken Arrow, the way it does in a town that size. A local boy getting arrested outside the Tulsa County Courthouse for pawning his dead mother's wedding ring is exactly the kind of story that travels on its own legs. The sneaker business Deacon had been running fell apart within the month. The other investors pulled out fast once the story hit a local Facebook group. Deacon himself stopped texting Cole inside of a week. The 2 other boys from the barbecue photo, gone not long after that. A girl he'd been seeing, someone named Paige, who I'd met exactly twice, ended things over text. Not even a phone call. Just silence. The same silence he'd handed me for 4 straight years, finally landing back on him for the first time in his life. He spent those 4 nights in that cell with nothing but his own thoughts for company. No phone, no friends, no filtered photos of somebody else's good time, just concrete and the sound of his own breathing. And when he finally walked out into the daylight, he had exactly what he'd wanted for 4 years. No father telling him what to do, no rules, no expectations weighing him down. He just didn't understand yet what all of that was going to cost him. Over the 3 weeks that followed, I did the work I should have started doing years earlier. I called the landlord on his apartment, paid the early termination fee myself, and turned in the keys. I took my name off the credit card I'd been letting him use for gas and groceries. I canceled the phone line I'd been paying for since he started college. The financial bleed that had been draining me dry for 4 years finally stopped, all at once, like a faucet somebody had finally remembered to shut off. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, he showed up at the house. I saw him coming up the driveway through the front window, wearing the same gray hoodie he'd worn to his mother's funeral, and something about that detail sat wrong in my chest, though I couldn't tell you exactly why. He walked up to the door and tried his key. I watched his face when the deadbolt didn't turn. I'd had the locks changed that Monday. He knocked. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. Beside me sat a single duffel bag, packed and zipped. "What is this?" His voice was already trembling. "Your things. All of them." His face crumpled. "Dad, I have nowhere to go. I have nothing." This is the part where the old version of me would have broken. This is the part where I would have said, "Come on inside. Let's talk this through. I'll always be here for you, no matter what you do." I said some version of that sentence for 4 straight years, and every single time I said it, I taught him a little more that nothing he did would ever actually cost him anything. "Not this time. You've got exactly what you said you wanted," I told him. "Freedom. No father telling you what to do. No rules, no expectations. Isn't that what you called it, back when you thought I was being controlling? You're free now, Cole. Nobody's controlling you anymore. That's not fair." "Fair." I kept my voice level. "You sold your mother's wedding ring for $300 and a sneaker scheme that didn't even last a month. You called it just a ring. Well, this is just a house. Go build your own life somewhere else. You're on your own now." He stood there on the porch a long moment, mouth open, waiting for me to take it all back the way I'd taken everything back for 4 years. Every ultimatum, I mean it this time, every line I'd drawn in the sand that washed away the second he raised his voice or lowered it just right. I didn't take it back. I picked up the duffel bag and set it down in front of his feet. Then I stepped back inside, closed the door, and turned the deadbolt. I didn't watch him walk away down the driveway. I didn't need to. I'd spent 4 years watching him walk all over me. I figured I'd earned the right not to watch this particular part. That evening I made myself a real dinner, not just something reheated standing over the counter. Grilled a couple of bratwursts out on the back patio, the kind Diane used to make every 4th of July. the kind you get from the butcher counter at the Reesers on Kenosha. I sat outside and ate slow, listening to the neighborhood wind down into evening. Somebody's sprinkler 2 yards over. A couple of kids riding bikes up and down the cul-de-sac, like nothing in the world was wrong. Afterward, I went upstairs, opened the bottom drawer, and took out the wooden box. I sat on the edge of the daybed and held it in both hands the way I used to, before any of this, before a stolen ring and a rundown pawn shop and a courthouse plaza full of strangers filming my son's worst day. I opened the lid. The diamond caught the last light coming through the window, same as it always had, same as it always would. I spent 4 years trying to hold on to a son who didn't want to be held the way I was holding him. I told myself, if I gave him everything, every excuse, every dollar, every second chance, he'd stay close. He'd love me back the way I loved him. But he didn't stay close. He took. And when he finally took the one thing in this house I could never replace, I understood something I should have understood a long time before that night. Love without any boundaries on it isn't love. It's a kind of hostage-taking, dressed up in kinder words. And I was done being a hostage in my own life. I closed the box, gently, and set it back in the drawer. Closed the drawer. I didn't feel angry sitting there. I didn't feel triumphant either. This was never about winning anything. What I felt, mostly, was quiet, the kind of still you only get once you've finally put down something heavy that you've been carrying so long you forgot it even had a weight to it. For the first time in 4 years, sitting in that quiet house with the last of the daylight fading out the window, I finally had it back. He sold his mother's ring for $300 and a business that lasted a month. He said it was just a ring. In the end, he got nothing out of it. And me, I finally got my life back. If this one hit close to home for you, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know down in the comments where you're listening from tonight.